You want to be a good coach and know how everybody in your group offer is doing, but as your group program, mastermind, or membership starts to grow, there's just no way you're going to be able to keep everybody's progress in your head. Luckily, with Airtable, you don't have to. In this video, I'm going to show you how to manage your group offer student engagement all inside of Airtable. If you're planning on growing your group offer this year and you don't want to lose track of your students' progress, you're going to want to stick around. My name is Ashley, and I'm an Airtable and automation expert that helps coaches organize and automate the back-end operations of their 6- and 7-figure group offers. I've helped countless entrepreneurs use Airtable to improve their student experience, make data-driven decisions, have their biggest launches ever without burning out their team. By the end of this video, you're going to learn what student engagement data you can actually centralize into Airtable, how to do that, and why it's so important to keep all of that data in one central spot. And I'm also going to show you some automations that you can use to keep students engaged and have all of your students feeling seen and cared for, regardless of your group program size. So let's get into it. Okay, let's talk about what data you can and should be automating into Airtable and why you'd want to do that. So when it comes to your students and when it comes to your group program, there are just so many moving parts. You've got your curriculum in one platform, you've got your community in another, you got your Zoom calls, you got your forms. There is gold in all of that data, but only if you're able to actually centralize it and look at it in one place. Our Airtable framework is centralize, optimize, analyze. So before you can analyze, before you can make these fun reports, these cool interfaces, the data has to be centralized inside of Airtable. Here are some of the key data points that we recommend centralizing into your group program. So 3 examples of student engagement data that you can bring into Airtable is the community engagement, lesson completion, and attendance, so live call attendance. So depending on what the tech is that you're currently using, some of it's not as automation friendly as others. So we recommend that you bring in whatever you can. So let's talk about community engagement. So absolutely the most friendly, automation friendly software on the market for automations when it comes to community is Circle. We have Circle, we love it. We bring in every post and every comment from our community into our Airtable group program hub. And what happens is when that gets automated in, new post or new comment gets automated into a community engagement table inside of Airtable, we link that post or comment to the student's primary student record. So we have a table with all of our students, and anything that they do in terms of the program gets tied, gets linked to their record. So I can open up Ashley's record and I can see when's the last time Ashley's commented, when's the last time she's posted, how many posts has she made over time. When you have all of this data at your fingertips, it's so helpful to see, one, the health of your community, how often are people engaging, how many folks are engaging, what's the average number of posts per student. That data is really interesting to have. You can also set automations up to say, if someone hasn't engaged in the community in the last 30 days, send them an email just reminding them that the community exists, right? So like we said, when that data is centralized, you can optimize your workflows, you can analyze the data, there's so much you can do. So that's the community data. So in terms of tech, Circle is the most automation friendly. I believe at the time of this recording, Mighty Networks can only bring in posts and not comments. Slack can bring in messages, and Facebook groups are a little dicey. I don't think you can bring the right data in for those at this time. So you could either eventually at some point move into more automation friendly software, or you can just work with what you have. So the next piece of data that we really recommend you bring in is your lesson completion. This is so helpful to see, again, start to see those trends, and these things start to stack on each other. So when there is a new lesson completed in your course platform, add it to a course completion log. So you'll see that we're starting to stack engagement, right? We can see the community engagement, we can see the course engagement. Same thing, when a lesson is completed, it's connected to their student record. You're going to start to see a more holistic picture of your students' engagement. Not all course platforms have this set up to say when there's a new lesson completed, zap, send it to Airtable. Some do, some don't. There are some workarounds if your current course platform doesn't have a new lesson completed zap trigger. But for the most part, if you can do it, we would definitely recommend you bringing in any course completions into Airtable. So we've got community and we've got course. Next up, we've got Zoom attendance, live event attendance. So this isn't as automatic. There is some software if you're dealing with hundreds of people on your group calls to automate this. But for the most part, we do this manually while we're on the call. So we have a Zoom attendance table and we have the call. So it's like April 18th call. And we have an admin team member while they're on the call taking notes. They're actually kind of logging just who's there on the call. This is so helpful too, because you see, we're again, even more data. We're getting such a rich picture of a student's engagement. Maybe they're not engaging in the circle community, but they're really active on calls. So you get to start to see how people engage and paint this holistic picture. So when all of this data is in one spot inside of Airtable, you can start to see that you can paint this more rich picture of your students and how they engage in your program than if all of that data was just in silos, you wouldn't even touch it. So data points that we recommend automating into Airtable is community engagement, lesson completion, and live call attendance. Now I'm going to get into what we can do with that later on in this video, but really the first thing is we want to make sure you can get that stuff into your Airtable. Now, some of the tech you might be using may not be the most automation friendly, and the best way to check this is go to Zapier, zapier.com, or in your Google search, type in your tech, Zapier, Airtable, and see what pops up. So if you go to Circle, for example, if you type in Circle, Airtable, Zapier, you're going to see so many different options of things you can automate and play with. That's what we love to see when we're picking tech. And some of your tech might not have that. So ultimately, eventually, we do recommend you choose your tech based on what is the most automation friendly. But if your tech is not compatible and you don't feel like switching, that's okay. You just will have some limitation in what data you can bring into Airtable. So for community, Circle is absolutely the most robust in terms of automations. Mighty Networks, you can bring in posts, but you can't bring in comments. Facebook groups, at least as of right now, you can't bring in the name of the person, which makes it pretty useless. Slack has some integrations as well. So I really recommend you checking out what you can bring into Airtable with your current community platform and bring that in. So the Zap will be when there's a new Circle post, when there's a new Slack message, add it to the community engagement log table and then connect that record to their student profile. Now, if this is like, Ashley, you are going way too fast, like what are you even talking about, like linking all these things together? I've got you. I want you to check out my free masterclass, the 3 Airtable systems you need before your next 6-figure group program launch. That's really going to show you like logistically how all this stuff fits together, kind of show you the back end of Airtable. But just know that you have to do some automations to like literally automate getting all of that data from different tech pieces into Airtable. So we've got your community platform, we've got your course engagement, and now course engagement, some platforms have it, some platforms don't. And what's nice about some of the course platforms is you can actually, if they don't have a new lesson completed, send to Airtable automation. There's some things you can do with something called email parser by Zapier, which we're not going to get into, but there's ways that you can bring in that lesson completion into Airtable. So again, definitely check that out. If you have questions about, is my tech right? Ashley, do you like this tech for communities or courses? Go ahead and drop those in the comments and I'm happy to let you know our thoughts and opinions on those. So you'll want to automate in your community engagement. You want to automate in your course engagement. And then, of course, we want to bring in your live attendance. So who is showing up live on the calls and who is submitting questions to your calls. So for submitting questions to your calls, that's actually all going to be internal in Airtable anyways. You're going to have a form. So if you use a Google form right now, you'd move that into your Airtable hub. And so every question that someone asks is tied to their student record, as well as their community engagement, as well as their lesson completion. So you're going to start to see this kind of holistic picture coming together, right? So you'll have that. And then when you're on a call, there is some tech that can automate the attendance in Zoom, something called virtually. But typically, if you have, under 20 people on a Zoom call, what we do is we just kind of manually add them. We manually kind of keep attendance inside of our Airtable base. But that is really helpful to see over time how many people have attended our events. If someone is complaining that they're not getting value in the program, we can look it up and say, hey, you haven't engaged in the course platform, you haven't been to any calls, and we just have all of that data at our fingertips. And there's just so much we can do with it. So if there's any other pieces of your puzzle, of your group program puzzle that you have, we really recommend you centralizing all of that stuff into Airtable, into one group program hub, and tying all of those pieces of your student and their engagement to what's called a primary student record. Okay, so now that all of that student engagement data is centralized in one space, now we can play with it. I've kind of alluded to some of the things that you can do, but I want to give you some tangible examples. So, because it's all centralized, now we can optimize. So, optimizing for me is I love to play with automated engagement emails. And like I said, with the holistic picture that we have when all of your data is centralized in one spot, you can be really intentional about what types of messages you want to send to check in on your students and when. For example, you might have somebody that's really active in your community group, but hasn't been to a call in a long time. And you don't want to send them an email that's like, hey, we haven't seen you, like, come to the calls. If they're like totally thriving in another like part of your program, because everything is centralized, you get to piece it together and really architect what you want your check-ins to be. So here are some of the check-ins that we recommend if you have everything centralized. So we do like to say, if you haven't engaged in the community in 30 days, we have an automation through Airtable. The automation is the last time they engaged was 30 days ago in the group program. Then send them an email that says, hey, name, just checking in on you. You know, we have this community group that's thriving. We'd love to have engagement in there. We just want to remind you that this is a resource that's available to you. When they haven't engaged in certain features of the program, because everything's centralized in Airtable, you can decide which ones you feel are relevant enough to kind of nudge them and just remind them that, hey, this is available to you. Now, like I said, everything stacks on each other when it's all centralized and it paints a holistic picture. So what we can actually say is any of those feature specific reminders are great, but something else we like to do is say, if they haven't completed a lesson, if they haven't engaged in the program, if they haven't gone to a call, they haven't submitted a question, they basically kind of ghosted the program. That's a much different email than just, hey, just checking in on you, just remind you that the community exists, right? So because all of those things are together in connected to their like student record, you can craft an email that says, hey, we haven't seen you. Where have you been? Here are 3 options. Hit reply and let us know which one applies to you. So what we like to say is, number 1 is, yep, I've just been busy, but like I'll come back eventually. 2 is, hey, thanks for the reminder, but I'm not really executing this right now. Or 3 is, I've been stuck and didn't know how to ask for help, and I want to ask for help. And when you have that automation, people feel so taken care of and so cared for. And spoiler alert, it's automated. So you care about your students, right? And you care about their engagement. But there's no way that as your program goes to 100, 200, 300 people, even 50 people, that you'll be able to remember to check in on every single person. So when you have all that data centralized, then you can start to optimize these workflows and optimize engagement and start to automate some of these automated check-ins. That's a huge reason why we really recommend centralizing all of that data inside of Airtable about your students' engagement, just so you can really tailor these automated engagements accordingly. And finally, when you automate your student engagement into Airtable, not only is everything there so you to easily access, for you to easily set up engagement automations, but it helps you make incredibly rich data-driven decisions because every question you could have about your program is all in one central spot. So because all of that data is connected and centralized inside of Airtable, truly any question you have about your program can be answered. Some of the things that are really interesting to see when you start to centralize this stuff is, what's the average number of posts people make in our community? What's the average attendance rate of our live calls? If someone requests a refund, you can hop in and see, okay, they've done 50% of the program, they've attended 2 calls. You get to see all of that data and you don't have to really hunt. It's all just sitting there ready for you to analyze. I just want you to imagine how amazing it feels and how legit you feel to just know any question you have about your program is absolutely just going to be answered with a couple clicks, with just being able to see all of that data because it is all centralized. So I have said centralized probably 24 times in this video, but that's really the purpose of Airtable. And that's really the point of having this database. So everything is in one spot. So you can easily play with automation, so you can easily analyze your data, and you can just keep getting better. At Systems Over Stress, we really believe that as you grow with these systems, your program can get better as it gets bigger. And because everything is centralized, those high level of high touch expectations you have about making sure people are seen and taken care of, Airtable is like the only way that it's possible to scale and not sacrifice that level of high touch engagement with your clients. And what's amazing about this is I'm not asking you to do any more work, really. You're already running live calls. You already have a community. You already have people completing your lessons, right? So it's just setting up a couple automations to get all of that centralized in one spot. So you do that once, and then that is just automatically going into your hub, and just every day your data gets richer and richer and more robust. So if you're curious about what this looks like behind the scenes, I want you to sign up for my masterclass, the 3 Airtable systems you need before your next 6-figure group program launch. That shows everything that I just talked about and more. And like I said, if you have any questions about Airtable, anything at all, please go ahead and drop those in the comments. Let us know what you want to cover next. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe to this video, to this channel, and we will see you in the next video.